Hello, folks. Welcome to part 4 of the CSS tutorial. This time we're going to be concentrating on fonts, having some fun with some text writing and all the little tricks that you can do with the text in HTML and CSS. What can we do? Well, we can do shadowing. We can do borders around the text. We can do text in angles, different fonts from the internet. Got plenty of examples along with the code to go with it, and you're really gonna enjoy this today. But a few things we gotta cover before we get to it. First of all, the CSS box model is important. As you remember, for every element in HTML, we have the actual content. The content can be text or a graphic, right? It could be text or a graphic, and there's what we call the padding. The padding is the distance between the content and the border. The border can have a particular width, and then there's the margin, right? All of these elements are, they have sizes. So that's one thing that we need to go over. I covered this already in a prior part of the tutorial, in a prior tutorial, but it's important that we cover that because we're going to be going over paddings and borders and in text. Obviously we're going to concentrate on text, but it's important that we know that we have differences and spacings and all of these. We control all of them. Another thing that we need to cover here before we get to the actual exercises is the font syntax. The reason I'm putting this here is because when I get to the examples, there's a reason why I put them in a particular order, So when we use the font element, if you will, we have some parameters, we have some attributes there. These are required. The size and the line, the line height, they are required. And then the family of the font, like Times New Roman, Courier, whatever the font name it is, these are required. The order of these over here doesn't matter how you put them, and they are optional. The style, the variant, and the weight. We're gonna, obviously this is the how thick something else and the styles, that I'm gonna go over all these on the examples. Don't worry about it. But just remember, this is the general syntax for a font, because we're gonna go over it in the examples, and I won't be able to show the image, this particular image, when we get to the examples, because I have my browser open and I have my brackets for my HTML, CSS code open, and I like to show those only. Another thing that I need to cover before we get to it is lengths. And throughout all of the exercises prior to this and here as well, I'm always talking about pixels, px, right? Px. But there's other ones that I'm going to be using today, like EMs and BW. So this is the things that we need to know. When you're doing things on the screen on an HTML, you can do centimeters or millimeters. Obviously, these two are in the decimal system. We have inches. 1 inch equals 96 pixels, and it equals also 2.54 centimeters. You can look this up on the, if you're a math person, you'll know that 1 inch equals 2.54 centimeters. But what's new is the number of pixels. Now, these are absolute lengths. Remember, if you have a screen that is 17-inch diagonal, it doesn't mean they're not always the same. Remember that the side and how tall that is a different value, but that's where this comes from. Now, most of my examples, they use the px, pixels, where 1 pixel, according to this, is 1/96th of an inch. So if you're ever wondering, well, why did it come with 10 pixels or 25 or what does it mean? Well, it means exactly that. 1/96th of an inch is 1 pixel. If I have 10, obviously is 10/96 of an inch, right? Then we have points. I hardly ever use points, but they are very useful, especially, you probably have seen the points in documents, in 1/72th of an inch equals 1 point. You see this in Word documents, in design and what have you. But if you're doing um, let's say brochures or flyers and all that for the internet, for the web, you want them to match those of the actual printout flyers. Well, now you're looking at points, right? And then we have packets where one pica or PC is equal to 12 points. So obviously 6 of these equals 1 inch, right? Now you can use this as conversions as you will, but these, there they are. I wanted you guys to have these so you know where they come from when I'm using them on my examples. I don't want you to be lost as to why I use them. Uh, a little bit more about lengths. Now we have the relative lengths. These change, okay? They're not absolute, they change. So we have EMs, this is a very popular, is relative to the font size of the element, where one EM equals 1 times the size of the current font. What does that mean? If it's Times New Roman, 1 EM equals the size of that Times New Roman font. If it's Helvetica or Arial or any other, so the EM changes depending on the size of the font. So it's relative. EX is relative to the X height of the current font. I don't think I've ever used this, guys, the EX, to be honest, but there it is. In case you ever see it, that's where it comes from. The same with CH, relative to the width of the zeroth of the number 0. Again, these two I've never used. I don't think I've ever used it. I mean, perhaps in a class, just to mess with my students, but honestly, I don't use these two. The one I use is EM. Relative to the font size of the root element, REM, I've never used either. I don't think I've ever used it, not even in examples, because they're there. All I can tell you. Now, this one I do use, VW. It is relative to 1% of the width of the viewport. What is the viewport? That is the window size. Now, if you have a phone, a smartphone, like most of you probably have, or a tablet, the browser window is always the same. It's the size of your tablet or your phone or your smartphone. But if you have a computer and you have a browser and the window adjusts, you can resize the window. Doesn't matter if it's a Mac, Linux, Unix, Windows, it doesn't matter, right? You resize the window. Well, this is relative to that window size. So obviously, if everything is in BWs, resizing the window around is definitely gonna make everything adjust automatically, which is pretty awesome. Equivalent to that, we have VH, which is relative to the height of the viewport. I don't use it, it's there. Vmin is relative to the viewport's smaller dimension. It calculates that for you, or the largest dimension. I don't use these. I'll tell you, for these, I use EM and I use VW. Those are the most popular ones, along with a very important one, a percentage. It is relative to the parent element. And you've probably seen this throughout HTML, 25% or 5%, or, it is a relative value depending on the value that the parent element. So that is there's some examples I think I'll be using for that, because we want to do, especially with borders, we want to make them to a particular percentage as opposed to number of pixels. Finally, this here, I'm not gonna put it's not gonna be in part of my examples, but I did cover it on my post on my WordPress, and I needed you to see this. This goes in your HTML document. It says meta name viewport content is width equals device. I misspelled it. This is a quotation, guys. Just so you know, this quotation right there. Width equals device minus width. Initial scale equals 1.0. Okay, so this here, when you have a web page and you see it on the computer, it doesn't really, you're gonna see something like this, the one on the left. In fact, I'm gonna go ahead and activate this here. You're gonna see something like this. And that's okay. The problem is try viewing this on a smartphone, especially the little smartphones, not the big ones. Or it doesn't matter if it's Android or iPhone. It doesn't matter either one. If it's an Android, Pixel, Google, this is hard to read. So what you want, and you've probably seen this on some websites, you go to the website on the computer and it looks one way, like this, and you go to the phone and now it looks like this. It adjusted everything. Well, that's where the viewport comes in. And anyways, there's a little typo here with the equal. The equal right here goes like this. Okay, that's what this is. I'm not gonna edit the video. I'm just gonna put this right, goes right there, and everything is the same. Anyways, having this in mind, I have some very cool examples. Just like my prior part of my tutorial, I have all my brackets with all the files open, and then I have Safari in this case with all of the how the videos look like. I mean, how the images look like. And so you can see, and I will explain all of the stuff as we go through it. So anyways, I hope you enjoy this tutorial. So let's get to it. Let's go for it. All right, folks. So here we are on the examples for formatting some text. I'm using my Mac as usual. I'm using brackets. And as you can see here, I have preloaded 13 examples. I'm gonna start with the first one. I'm gonna widen this up only so that you can see the alt text. And over here, I have Safari to the left. And each one of these tabs is the example shown. I've done this in the interest of saving some time. So the default here obviously is a little text decoration. We're using the box model that I mentioned earlier. For my style, here's my every element will be in red with the background in green. So here's my red and there's my green background. But I'm also saying, look, for my paragraph, do a border, which is 4 pixels with double line in black color. And here is the border around my paragraph. And when I get to the actual body of my HTML, obviously here's a heading in red. That's this right here. But then I'm adding a color of blue to a paragraph in blue. That's the paragraph in blue. If I would omit this, it will also be in red. Okay, so this is a very standard, there's regular font, regular paragraph font, and then there's a border around it. Let's go to the next example. There's nothing much to it, this is my starting point. Now I'm going to go to the next example. Now I added a margin. Remember the box model. If you have any trouble on these examples, go back to the box model in the beginning of this video. The only thing I added here is this. I added a margin to the left and a margin to the right. And there is also a margin to the top and the bottom. And if you can see here, there's my box, but this time here's my margin. 100 pixels, remember a pixel, and then another 100 pixels, left and right. That's what the margin looks like when you put, a difference. If I would do something like, let's say instead of 100 on the left, let's say I do 50, and I'm gonna go ahead and save that, and then I'm gonna reload this. Now it's spread to a little bit here and bigger over here. Now, as you notice, the text is right in the center of the box. I mean, right inside the box right here. Right inside. There's no margins. There's a margin for the box, but there is nothing in between. Remember the padding, right? The padding. So let's go to our third example. And here it is. And here I'm leaving the same margin left and right. I'm adding these 3 lines. My padding up to the top, the bottom, and the left. So what is the padding? That's the space between the element. Here's the element. And inside. I think about it like a margin inside of the box. There's my padding right here, And this over here, left and right, are my margins. Now remember, the border syntax is border width, which is optional. If I wanted to do a, I'm here, I'm doing the long version, if you will. I'm doing element by element. If I wanted to use the shorthand syntax, the border um, syntax will be to do the border width, then the border style, then the border color, where the border width will be a fixed number. So I'm using pixels here. Um, this right here, and I'm talking about this here, right? Okay, I'm not talking about this guy right there. When you do the shorthand for the border, I start with the width, and it could be 2 pixels, 3 EMs, 1 VW, a valid value. Then I have to have the style. The style will be fixed, thin, medium, thick, right? I'm sorry, that will be the, I'm getting confused. That's the size. The style will be non-solid, dotted, dash, double. We've seen this in other, it could be inherited, which is from the parent element. It could be hidden. It could be rich, group. That could be, and then we have a color, which any valid, I usually like to type the color name, but it could be an RGB value or a hex value, HSL value, whatever. As long as it's a valid way, you can put it in there. And this right here is the only required attribute to the border when you're doing shorthand. The only one. Of course, it's always a good thing to put the width, but it's always good. All right. So that's my padding. There's my margins. And again, this is the format for border. The size, the style, and the color. Okay. Let's go to the next example. And now we're going to text decoration. Now, text decoration, as you can see here, I'm doing some definitions here. My border, center, right, and justified. My border is 4 pixels double red, which is these borders right here. And all I'm doing in this example is doing different, centering, left or right, justify. That's all I'm doing, which is the text alignment. The text alignment. And if we in here, I have my classes, which is center and border, right and border, and justify and border. So for each one of the paragraphs, I'm telling it to do the border, number one, and they all have the word border in there, right? And the other classes either center, right, or justified. So here's my centered, here's my right, and on the justify, obviously, it goes edge to edge on every line. And this first one, which doesn't say anything, that's just the default left to right. That is the text decoration for the text alignment. Now we have text decoration. Now, here are my examples. Before I go to this, there's 3 things to consider in text decoration. One is the type of line, and it could be none, it could be underline, overline, line through, it could blink, or it could be mixed, a mixture of all of them. We have the style, which could be solid, double, dotted, dash, or wavy. And of course, we have any valid color. So with that said, I'm doing my classes here, overline, line through, underline, a combination of overline and underline. These 3 are underlines, but I'm doing this one is red, this one is dash, and this one is the thickness to 5 pixels. Now, how does that look? So here's my overline. It goes on the top of the first line and on top of the second line. That's why it looks like 2 lines. The second one is the line through. So here's the line in the middle of both these lines. They used to use this a lot for when you're making, like if you use Word, right? If you're making some corrections. Then we have what we normally use is the underline. And here's the underline right there, underline of each one of the lines. And of course, if I do single line, that's what it looks like. And if I do this, that's what it looks like, okay? I'll do it like that, just so you can see it. The other one is underlined. Now, the difference here in this one, for example, is that it's now red. This one here, you can barely tell, is blue. Oh, it's black, actually. Well, but it's, what do you call it? It's dash, okay? This is a dash line. And this bottom one, I'm making a thickness. That's why it looks so thick right there, because I'm doing the thickness of 5 points, but it's underlined. So those are the different classes for text decoration. All right, let's go to the next example now. Example 6. And I'm doing transformation. Transformation, I'm going to make this, well, it doesn't matter how big I make it, it's not going to be enough. So I'm just going to leave it there for now. Transformation has, there's 4 things you can do in transformation. You can do, and I have them right here. Obviously, for my paragraph, I'm saying, look, do the text in blue, do the yellow background, do a justify line, and do a border around it of 5 pixels, double in green color, and a padding of 20 pixels. That's so I can see inside clearly. There's my border, and the actual web is white. There's a formatting is only applied to the paragraphs. Now, we have 4 different types here of transformations. My text indent. The text indent is only applies to the first line. So here I'm doing 50 pixels on the first line, and that's this right here. That's the indent. The second is the letter spacing. I made it 5 pixels here. You see this, how it looks all spread out? There's 5 pixels in between each letter, and the spaces count as letters. That's why they look bigger than normal. It's not that it's justified, it's just spacing. Then we have line height, and I made it 2. 2 is like a double line, right? So you can see there's spacing in between the lines. Again, if I do it like this, it doesn't matter how I modify it, there is a line in between. So that's double line. And finally, we have what is called word spacing, and I made it 10 pixels. Here, the letters, they have the regular spacing. It's the space in between the words that is bigger. Okay. If I do, let's say I don't do the justify, I'm gonna get rid of that. And I'm gonna save it. And I'm gonna go over here and reload it. And now I'm not doing any justify. Now I'm looking at left to right. See, it's all uneven. But I wanted you to see the difference. That's the spacing between the letters, in between the words, the indents. Okay. And there's the code right there. The next example that I have here is text decoration. Text shadowing. Text shadow can be 2 different things. It could be none. I can do text shadow none, which is the default, I guess, if you want to call it something. Or we can give it parameters. Now, there are 2 required parameters. And you can see the first one here, text shadow, 2px, 2px, 2 pixels, 2 pixels. The first one is the X offset. The second one is the Y offset. Now you can also add a color. Obviously, we can do the color. And you can see here that I have a 3rd value. That is the blur radius. So here's my first example right here. This is 2 pixel, 2 pixel. The rest are 3. Here's my 3 pixel, 3 pixel in blue. These 2 look similar. It's only 1 pixel in difference, so I can tell a lot of difference. But you can tell that one is black and one is blue. Just doing it like that, it looks awful, right? I mean, I don't like it. I'm putting it here just so you can see the difference. But the next one, 3 pixels, 3 pixels, 5 pixels, and I'm doing it black, but then I'm changing the color to white. That's the text color, right? Look how now this one right here looks decent. It looks good. We could do 0 and 0, but 4 pixels, and then what is this? RGB, right? So that's red. For the background. So here is, let's see, A, B, C, D. Yeah, that's this one right here. That's the one with 0, 0. And you know, I'm missing one. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. Yeah, this one right here. I'm sorry. That's this one right here. The letters are white, but there's the shadowing around it. This one here is that one. Actually, it's not. That's I'm getting my styles confused, guys. This is A right here. That's B. That's C. This is D. That's with the text color white. That's right there. That one is this one. This one is this one right there. Text shadowing with 0, 0, 4 pixels. And I'm using the red. There, you can barely tell the red, but it is red right there. Then the next one, I'm doing 0, 0 and 3 pixels red, but then I'm combining it with 0, 0, 5 pixels in blue. And that's this one right here. I'm doing 2 text shadowing, 2 text shadows right there. The next one, I'm doing the white color. And again, I'm doing, on this one, I'm doing 3 shadows. 1, 2, 3, and then the text of color. And that looks like this. See, the text is actually white. The remaining, the blur, looks like a big old blur around it. It's a combination of these 3. And finally, you can see these negative values of -1 pixel, 0, 1, 0, -1. That does this right here. And there's 4 of them, but this looks really pretty, right? Looks really, start doing these values. So my thinking when I did this, I wanted you guys to experiment with the different values you can put in. You know, I personally think that something like this looks awful. This one looks pretty. This one is interesting. This one looks pretty. This one I like, but this is probably the best one of all. So experiment with it. Experiment. There's the code right there, so you can play with your text shadowing. After text shadowing, we have box shadowing. In box shadowing, or border shadowing, I should say, border shadow or box shadowing, any way you want to call it. You can do, well, you have to have the H offset and the V offset, where the H offset is the horizontal and the V is the vertical. Let's start with that. And everything else is optional, but the rest of it is the blur, the spread, and the color. So we normally do want to include them all. So let's do a regular shadow right there. We're using 2 pixels solid. The padding is 10 pixels. I do the padding the same for all. And then the shadow is the same for most of them. But there's the shadow for 6 pixels and 4 pixels. That's this example right here. And you see the little black right there in the bottom. That's typical box shadow. But on the next one, it says blur. So now I got 6, 4, and 8. That 8 causes this right there. You see how it looks like it's a blur right there. The spread 1 and spread 2 are these 2 right here. One of them uses 5 pixels. The other one uses -5 pixels. And the difference is one is on the bottom right or the top right, right there. See, there's a blue, there's a red. That's the different two different spreads value, no blur. I have, or we have what is called an inset. When you do an inset, and I'm using EM values in here and I'm doing yellow, look at this right there. Now remember, when I'm using EMs, it's proportional to the font, okay? Or the object, in this case is the box. So here is the yellow, but it's inside. It's not outside, it's inside because it's inset. And of course, you can do multiple shadows separated, right? You can do separated by commas. Here is one red on the bottom and right with a blurring on the top and left, right there. And that does this right here because -1 EM goes to the top. So that's how you do box shadowing, also called border shadowing. In fact, many textbooks you see it as border shadowing. Now we're gonna get to the coolest things, the fonts. And here is examples of fonts. As you recall, there is a format for font, but in addition to font, you can do it, you don't have to do it shorthand. You can do the regular, which is the font family. There are, I believe, 5 families. I like 4 of them in general. Your Times New Roman, your Arial, your Lucida Console, and your Courier New. Some are sans serif and the other ones are serif. And the text here, I'm just putting in what each one is. So here's your Times New Roman. Here's your Arial. Here is your Lucida Console. And here is your Courier New. In the Lucida, I'm doing the font style to oblique. So that's oblique right there. This one here, the Courier New, see how it says small caps? That's the font variant. Font variant. So font styles can be normal, italic, and oblique. Font weight can be normal, bold, bolder, lighter, or a number between 100 and between 0 and 1,000 actually. But people like to do 100, 300, 500, 900. You can do different shades of the color basically. And you can do font variants, which is normal, small caps, or inherit, which is, as mentioned it, inherit grabs it from the parent element. Now, let's talk about a little bit fancier fonts, Google fonts. Now, there are many fonts out there. Yeah, those 5 fonts are good enough, but every now and then you want to get some more fonts. There's fonts, there's Google fonts, there's Adobe fonts, there's some paid and non-paid. Google's happen to be free. There are 2 ways to including fonts in our documents. This is the first one. I'll put in a link, relative style sheet, and you put this exactly like it is. HTTPS fonts googleepis.com CSS ? Family equals. And if you go to this website right there, you can see all of the fonts they have. They have like 1,000, guys. I'm not kidding. There's a ton of them in there. But and then you choose the ones you want. Now you can put just one of them, or like I have here 5, just separated with this vertical bar. You separate them with the vertical bar. You don't have to worry about quotes for this spacing here. Everything goes in one line. So what this does, it says, look, from all this, I'm going to use them. Now I go to my classes, and I'm using each one independently. Audio wide, freehand, Shalimar, Bebas new, and port 1. Okay. If that will makes it fit right there. So that's what it is right there. And so there's my font families. I'm doing them all 1.5 EMs, different colors. I'm doing them bold. And then I'm just printing them out. They're not doing anything fancy, but I wanted you to see the different type of font. This is the auto wide. This is the freehand, Shalimar, Bibas New, and Purit One. And these are just some of the examples I got. I mean, you can go, like I said, go to that website right there, and you're gonna get a ton of fonts. And all you gotta do is put the name that you want, and they're free. There is also a shorthand. Now, this is one way of doing it, through the link and do the font family, font size, color, all that. But you may want to also, or you could, if you want to preload them, I guess you can call it that. I can do this. Same thing. It looks the same, right? It looks the same. But they're not. Even though it says here 1.5 EM, they're actually not. I'm using the import. You see that import? It in CSS, import allows you to import something, and I'm using the URL, and I'm using the same, except I'm doing one by one each one of the fonts. So it imports them to your web, and then I can do the font. Remember the font shorthand font, and then I can just do bolder and then all. I'm doing in 2.5 EMs here, even though it says 1.5. And then I'm putting the name of the font, and then the color I'm doing separate. The color is separate. And here it is. That's what it looks like. So there's the two different ways of doing Google Fonts, through the link way, like that, and doing the font family. Or if you prefer, you can do the import and then do a font. It's your, whatever method you prefer, they do the same. All right, we're almost done, guys. Here's another one. In this example, I'm doing vertical writing. I'm keeping two of the fonts only for this example. And for vertical writing, we use the writing mode. So my classes here, these are just the fonts, just I had an earlier example. I have two new classes, from left to right or from right to left. So the vertical mode from left to right or right to left. And this is what it looks like. Here's an example of Google Fonts. You can see the text right here. This is line 1, 2, and 3, while this ones are line 1, 2, and 3. See, this one starts from right to left. This one is from left to right. And that's what this vertical LR, this writing mode right here, it's either one way or another, and it's from left to right or right to left. Obviously, the size of the window can determine how it looks, but nonetheless, there's still 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3, the opposite. So this is one way to do vertical writing, but this only does vertical left to right, right to left. What if I wanted to do an angle? And then we get to another way to do this, which is using the rotate function, the transform and then the rotate. So transform transforms a text. Now this is more flexible than the writing left to right or right to left. Here, however, think of this as a box. It creates a box where you tell it the height, you tell it your margins, your font size, your color. You can, you define everything you want. You can put this extra font, different fonts, whatever. But this is the key. You transform the box and you're gonna rotate it 90 degrees. And here is the same one, but I'm doing negative 90 degrees. And over here, I'm doing 45 degrees. So what does this look like? Well, this is clockwise. See, there's mine. This is counterclockwise. That's the negative 90. And this is 45 degrees. So that's how you do text in angles. So you have the left to right, right to left, and you can combine it along with this. You can combine it with the rotate. So this concludes all of the examples that I have for you. Regular, margins, padding, text decoration, lines, transformations, shadows for text, for borders, fonts, Google Fonts, different way of doing Google Fonts, vertical alignment, and transforming or rotating our text. Guys, this is I hope you don't mind. I'm myself pre-typing all these examples for you guys, and having them preloaded on my Safari, but it saves a lot of time. Hope you like this tutorial. If you do, please like, subscribe, and I hope you really learned something. You're welcome to copy the code. I invite you to go to my WordPress link as well, where I have more tutorials on HTML and on C++ and many other articles on Pascal and Visual Basic and you name it. I got all kinds of things in there. Until next time, please like and subscribe. All right, guys, take care.